Couple days ago, 3 days ago at this point, Hamas said that they wanted to release 2 hostages on humanitarian reasons. For one reason or the other, we do not know if Israel was negotiating with Hamas or not on the release of these hostages. They refused to say whether or not they were negotiating on the release, and this was an unconditional release. This was supposed to be for humanitarian reasons. These hostages were very old. Israel refused to say whether or not they were negotiating. Ultimately, Hamas sidestepped Israel and went to the Qatar government and Egypt to get these hostages released through the Rafah crossing. These are 2 old ladies who were in the kibbutz, one of the kibbutz that the Hamas and other Palestinian militant forces had taken over and brought back into the Gaza Strip, into their complex tunnel network, and they were released. And immediately the media went and talked to them to describe their accounts of the gruesome experience that they withstood, being kidnapped by Palestinian militants and then being sent to a tunnel network. Let's see how what happened, and let's see how the media covered it.
My mom is telling the horrific stories. She's saying that many people, a swarm of people, came through the fence. The defense cost 2.5 billion shekels, and it didn't help even a little bit.
Yeah, she says the fence that they propped up was ridiculous. Like, it was just 2.5 billion shekels, completely fucking ridiculous, completely useless in general.
My mom is saying that she was taken on the back of a motorbike with her body, with her legs on one side and her head on another side. That she was taken through the plowed fields with a man in front on one side and a man behind her. And that while she was being taken, she was hit by sticks by Shabab.
The reason you don't confirm you were in hostage negotiations is once people know you are negotiating externally, it can affect the negotiations. Hamas could demand more, as now there is an expectation Israel will give the release. Also, right-wingers will demand Israel walk away from any negotiations. Yes, I think that's a pretty fair assessment. For one reason or another, Israel refused to say whether or not they were in communication with Hamas at all. But ultimately, the way that this ended up playing out was that Hamas militants talked to the Qatari government and the Egyptian government to get these hostages out.
Shabab people. Until they reached the tunnels. There they walked for a few kilometers on the wet ground. There are a huge network of tunnels underneath. It looks like a spider web.
That's crazy that this is where they cut it off and not like other stuff. That's okay. Let's see.
Yocheved Lifshitz also spoke about how the hostages that she was with in Gaza were treated.
My mom is talking about coming there. When they arrived into a large hall. About 25 hostages were gathered, and after 2-3 hours, those hostages, 5 of them, she among them, were taken into a separate room. My mom is saying that they were very friendly towards them and that they took care of them, that they were given the medicine. That they were given medicine and they were treated. One of the men with them had badly injured from a motorbike accident on the way, and the paramedic was looking after his wounds. He was given medicine and antibiotics, that the people were friendly, that they kept the place very clean. They were very concerned about them.
You thought they cut that part? Lol, nice one. The reason why I thought they cut that part was because every single article that has been written on this, and the principle goes as follows. Dog bites man, that's not interesting. Man bites dog, that's newsworthy, right? This cuts against every single thing that has come out so far. There's a reason why you don't hear from the other peace activists that were in those same kibbutzim that have been talking about their perspective and who is to lay the blame on in this horrifying massacre that they withstood. There's a reason why it is also literally illegal to actually show things like this and to actually say things like this in general. Lifshitz press conference panned as disastrous for Israel, PR win for Hamas. I will show you exactly, I will detail to you exactly the many different moments where Israeli officials said showing this would have been absolutely, this was just a horrible idea, that she should have been vetted before being allowed to speak. Yocheved Lifshitz offered the first public account to emerge from more than 200 hostages estimated to be held in Gaza. 85-year-old held hostage in Gaza says she went through hell. She said that. There are parts of this, of her story, that are still truly horrific. I mean, she said they beat her with sticks. That's what she said originally when they were trying to apprehend her. Like, that's horrifying. And of course, if you only covered that aspect of it, which many news in the Western press did, which is understandable, that certainly is something you should cover. That's objective journalism. This is something to absolutely cover. But if you just cover that and bury the lead, yeah, she was hit with sticks while riding the motorcycle. Exactly. That's what I'm saying. This is an 85-year-old woman, right? Mentioning that is perfectly appropriate. Of course, that's the news. You're supposed to cover it. Burying the lead, however, on the other side of the story as to why she shook the hands of a Hamas militant and what her perspective is, and telling the Hamas militant shalom after shaking his hand, which has been a incredibly polarizing moment in Israel as far as I understand it. Like, a lot of people saw that and were losing their fucking minds over it, at least those who did see it. For you to understand the situation on the ground in Israel as best as possible, you have to remember that currently there are not just Palestinian citizens of Israel, but also Israeli citizens, Jewish citizens inside of Israel that are currently being apprehended by forces for saying things that are considered to be demoralizing to the IDF. This is the circumstance on the ground. This is the circumstance on the ground right now. So coverage like this completely cuts against, even if it's just an adequate representation of events. And there are 200 other hostages. Not all of them are going to have this perspective. Not all of them are going to say that their conditions were nice. Some of them are going to, and probably have, withstood horrifying moments. They will explain that. But the fact that people are, and this is not enough for me to like make an assessment or to say that like, look how good Hamas is or anything like that. That is not what I'm saying. But the idea that like having this be played is considered a crime basically in Israel. And the reaction overall from what I've seen online is crazy. Oh, she didn't say Hamas hit her with sticks. I believe she said sticks hit her as they rode through a field, not that they were hit with a stick mid-motorcycle ride. Oh, that was a mistranslation. Anyway, regardless, that the way that the media covered it was like that is what was happening, that like they beat her with sticks and that it was hellish. I think or it could have been civilians that hit her with sticks. I don't know. But it doesn't matter. What you need to understand is the likelihood of her saying this, an account that actually is quite similar to other accounts that have also been portrayed in Israeli media, is partially because there are a lot of people that live in these fucking communes that literally for 85 years have been working on recognizing the dignity and humanity of Palestinians in Gaza. This lady is one of these people, according to her own family's takes on the matter. That there are a lot of situations where inside of Gaza there isn't enough medical help that people can get. Sometimes Gazans have to be taken outside of the Gaza Strip and medevaced into Israeli hospitals. There are Israeli doctors that work on Palestinians from Gaza. One of those doctors, as a matter of fact, is currently being persecuted, which I will talk about as well. Dr. Abed Samara from Hasharon Hospital, who has invested his entire life in the Israeli health system. He has been treating Jews and Arabs wholeheartedly for years, but in one moment his life collapses. He is fired, accused of supporting terrorism and siding with Hamas. The reality is the opposite. But does the truth even matter? So this is something that I've tried to stress before, that there are people inside of Israel, obviously marginal for the most part and marginalized in general, that have dedicated their lives to ending the occupation. There are activist groups that have dedicated their lives into ending the occupation. Their voices, unfortunately, do not ever get heard. And now their voices are criminalized. Understand something. It is criminal. Omdim Be'echad translates to standing together. They're a peace movement, and the police constantly take down their pro-peace posters. Their demonstrations have been violently suppressed even before and certainly after the last siege on Gaza. This lady, according to her family, is she's not a part of this group, but she has helped transfer Palestinians out of Gaza into Israeli hospitals in the past. People that do stuff like that of course, are going to recognize the humanity of Palestinians and are going to have a very different perspective on the matter than those who are championing blood and soil narratives thousands of miles away. I went through hell, Ms. Lifshitz told reporters the day after her release, sitting in a wheelchair at a hospital in Tel Aviv amid a thicket of microphones. She was freed along with Nurit Cooper, 79, on Monday, and transferred from Hamas custody to Israeli forces via the International Committee for Red Cross in Egypt. Both of their husbands are still being held hostage in Gaza. Her account of the tunnels offered a glimpse of the difficulties facing Israel as it weighs whether and how to launch a ground invasion of Gaza to eliminate Hamas, which led to devastating October 7 attacks against Israel. Hamas has built a labyrinth of underground passages in Gaza for its fighters, military analysts said, complicating both Israelis' anticipated ground invasion and any attempt to rescue the hostages. Ms. Lifshitz's voice at times faltered as she recalled her abduction and the horrors suffered by her neighbors when Hamas attacked her town of Kibbutz near Oz. Her daughter, Sharon, who was crouched at her side on Tuesday, occasionally translated for foreign journalists. Many people stormed our homes. They beat people. Some of them they abducted, like me, Ms. Lifshitz said. It made no difference. They abducted the elderly and the young. This is important to understand because it's not like she's explaining the situation in a specific direction. She is just giving her firsthand accounts. This is constant with the immediate interviews that were conducted inside of kibbutzim, inside of the people that survived the attacks in the kibbutzim, where they would very openly be like, these are Hamas terrorists that came, but then they would talk about their experiences that contradicted some of the testimony. Now, if you're saying on the one hand that they're terrorists, like you obviously aren't, you're obviously not like doing propaganda for Hamas in the same way that like a lot of people will immediately rush to claim. It's not like she's fucking pro-Hamas, okay? In my memory, I have these images all the time, she added later. She said her kidnappers hauled her onto a motorcycle and beat her painfully in the ribs, making it hard for her to breathe, and also took away her watch. They drove off through the fields surrounding near Oz. They took her through a network of tunnels until they reached a large hall where about 25 people were, she said. After about 2 to 3 hours, they separated 5 people from her kibbutz into their own room where they were overseen by guards and a medic, she said. Ms. Lifshitz said that she and others were relatively well taken care of, given medicine and the same food as their captors. Fearing disease, her captors worked to sanitize the area, she said, and doctors would visit sporadically to check on them. They treated us gently and fulfilled all of our needs, she said. Hamas has released 4 hostages, including Judith and Natalie Ra'anan, American Israeli citizens who were freed last week. Ms. Lifshitz is the first released hostage to speak publicly about her ordeal. Ms. Lifshitz's husband, Oded, an Israeli journalist and peace activist, remains in Hamas captivity, according to Israeli authorities. The Hamas-led attacks against Israel's border communities shocked and traumatized the country. Israel has repeatedly fought short battles with Palestinian militants in Gaza in recent years, but nothing approaching the scale and brutality of the assault. Ms. Lifshitz at times criticized the Israeli military, saying that it and the Shin Bet domestic security service had ignored warning signs of the threat to towns near Gaza. The Israeli military's chief of staff acknowledged after the attacks that the military had failed to live up to its own mission to protect Israel's citizens. It's so strange. How strange that people who are directly victimized by this attack, people who are inside of Israel, on the Israeli security forces, the interior security, the FBI of Israel, they all are collectively saying the same things that I've been saying to you for a very long time now. Okay? Weeks before the assault, Palestinians had rioted and fired explosive balloons near the Gaza border fence, sparking fires in southern Israel, Ms. Lifshitz said. The Israeli army didn't take this seriously, she said.
The question is, why did you shake that Hamas activist hand when you crossed? Because they treated us very nicely. My mom is saying that they were very delicate and gentle with them and took care of all their needs. They seemed really prepared for it. They had concealed it for a long time, and they took care of all the needs that women need: shampoo, conditioner. Did they tell you anything about what was happening outside?
I find it almost terrible that they put this woman on such a show after all she went through. I'm almost certain that there is a very high likelihood that she wanted to do this, knowing full well that she wanted to give her own personal accounts to it, because no other hostage thus far has done this. No other hostage has come out and spoken. This is, 4 hostages have been released so far, and no one else has come out and spoken. Are you going to ignore the fact that her husband is still in Gaza? No, I mentioned that myself. I mentioned that as well. To me, however, the fact that she is a Palestinian peace activist, the fact that her husband is literally also a journalist / peace activist himself, plays more of a role in her commentary here than the fact that he is still apprehended and she's speaking out of fear and that she's like somehow coerced into saying these things. I don't think you guys understand personally how the complex dynamic of Israeli peace activists operate and coexist with Palestinians. Like I don't think you get that. She also personally did say, I lived through hell. I was beaten with sticks. This is what at least the immediate translation showed. So it's not like she's saying, I love Hamas, I want to hug and kiss them. She's just giving an honest assessment. If she personally was fearful, she probably would not have brought that up either, right? If she personally had an interest in portraying her conditions as different than they actually are, to present facts in a way that helps Hamas, then she would not have brought that up. Additional context, she was a member of Women Wage Peace, according to this veteran hostage negotiator. As she was being freed, Israeli hostage Yocheved Lifshitz shook the hand of her Hamas captor. I asked the veteran hostage negotiator Gershon Baskin, director of Holy Land Bond, International Communities Organization Middle East, author, negotiator, award-winning Times of Israel columnist, and Al-Quds newspaper columnist, what he made of that moment. This was his response.
And she was obviously being talked to by the Red Cross, and she's there and she turns around and she delivers a human gesture and a handshake to, I guess, somebody who was her captor.
If her husband is still a hostage, couldn't Hamas use that as leverage to make her say good things about the treatment? Absolutely. Except she didn't just say good things about Hamas. She also said that she was hit with sticks on the bike. So if that's the case, then she would not have mentioned that. Do you understand what I'm saying? And now we arrive at the last part of the equation. That's Stockholm Syndrome, which is what I was expecting. I thought that there would be a bunch of articles on the matter, except this account, or her anger and her feelings on the matter, her activism on the occupation, against the occupation, does not change the reality by simply saying Stockholm Syndrome. Stockholm Syndrome. I knew that it was going to come, and chatters are already fucking hitting that line. What you fail to recognize here, I have a translated version of 3 minutes. She doesn't mention any stick beating. That's what I'm operating off of what has been written thus far.
It's Hamas video that they put out. She was, leaving and saying goodbye, I assume. Well, what do you make of that? Sorry? What do you make of that gesture?
Well, I think, first of all, it's important to know who she is. She's a woman who has volunteered for years of driving Palestinian children and their mothers and fathers to hospitals inside of Israel for medical treatment. She has been a member of Women Wage Peace, Israel's largest peace movement. Also, another woman, Vivian Silver from Kibbutz Be'eri, was abducted and is held hostage in Gaza. She was one of the founders and leaders of Women Wage Peace. I assume that Yocheved speaks some Arabic, and she probably tried to communicate with her captors. I imagine that if I, God forbid, was being held in Gaza, I would make every opportunity to befriend the people who are holding me, because my life is at stake.
We were very hurt by the fact that the IDF did not know where are the scapegoats. They've warned us 3 weeks prior with people who came to the road and burned fields, sent incendiary balloons to burn our...
Yes, chatter, of course I know Rachel Corrie, one of the most famous fucking activists that was run over by an Israeli bulldozer. Yes, stop fucking begging me to cover Rachel Corrie, okay? I know, it is a horrifying crime that also telegenically was the murder of a white woman, a blonde white woman who also recognized the dignity and humanity of Palestinians and of course was murdered by an Israeli bulldozer. I know the story. How the fuck would I not know that story? Please shut the fuck up. Let me cover this. Okay?
To burn our fields. And the IDF did not address this seriously. Suddenly, on Saturday morning, when everything was quiet, there was a heavy bombardment of the communities. And with that, the masses infiltrated, blew up the expensive fence, opened the gates of the kibbutz and entered in their masses. It was extremely difficult. I keep having those images in my mind. He's asking, why did you shake the hand of the Hamas terrorist in the visual? They were gentle with us. Our needs were supplied.
אמא שלי אומרת שהם התייחסו אליהם בעדינות וסיפקו את כל הצרכים שלהם. My mom is saying that they treat them kindly and provided for them.
That was 85-year-old.
That's crazy, okay? It is. That is not something that you will hear. It's like not allowed for the most part to be repeated. People that have said far less have been punished inside of Israel. Criticism is pouring in after freed hostage Yocheved Lifshitz appeared to praise her Hamas captors and criticize Israel at a press conference earlier in the day. This is from Times of Israel. The Khan public broadcaster reports that Israeli PR experts are calling the decision to put Lifshitz in front of cameras a mistake. The station knows that the international media is now reporting on Hamas's kindness in taking care of the hostages' needs. In Israel Hayom, columnist Eddie Rothstein calls the interview a propaganda win for Hamas. What a brave and enlightened woman, the kind we thought they no longer make in Israel. And what a clumsy handling of the event, he writes. The truth is, you don't need to be a PR expert to know you can't have a press conference like this live on television. There's no doubt the Lifshitz statements could have been managed better, tweets Channel 12 reporter Daphne Liel, who adds her descriptions were still pretty shocking. Anyone sane should understand that medical attention she was given was intended to keep their bargaining chips alive and not from the kindness of their hearts. The channel's Dana Weiss calls the press conference a disaster, noting the lack of state intervention in managing her appearances. I think this is important to understand. That is important to understand. Why is this important to understand? What Daphne Leil is saying. It's not at the kindness of their hearts, but simply out of their interest, their self-interest in survival, that Hamas is offering medical attention. This is something that I have mentioned as well. But when I would mention this, many people in the chat would yell at me. So maybe when you hear someone who is reactionary have that same opinion inside of Israel proper, maybe you will also recognize this. Because it goes against the idea that these guys simply are there to do death and murder and are not operating out of their own self-interest in continuing their survival. The hostage taking in this circumstance is a cruel act. That much is true. I don't think anybody disagrees with that. But what you have to recognize is that there is a reason for it. There is a reason. This does not mean a justification, but to immediately hand wave away that plays into the narrative that Israel wants to put forward, which is that these guys took them to rape them and kill them. And they're going to go and kill them quietly, not in front of a camera. They're not going to use the hostages as a bargaining chip, but instead, they're just there to just like do brutality to them. It is already a brutal act to take someone as a hostage, but dead hostages are worth nothing to Hamas. Alive hostages that are well taken care of are worth everything to not only Hamas, but other Palestinian forces as well. The channel Dana Weiss calls the press conference a disaster, noting the lack of state intervention in managing her appearances. Toll's Tal Schneider takes aim at the hospital spokesperson who put Lifshitz in front of the cameras rather than just her family members, and then bragged about his ability to get a wow factor for journalists on Instagram. From a professional point of view, this is an embarrassment for the hospital, she writes on X. They are more mad. They're mad that this 85-year-old woman was able to accurately portray her experiences. That fucking blows my mind. If she had personally come out and been like, they were brutal, I would still cover it, because there is no reason for me to believe that she is lying in that circumstance, especially considering that she has her husband in captivity still. But because she gives a more balanced assessment of her conditions, everyone turns around and says, oh, well, she must be lying for one reason or another. And her balanced assessment also here. Yocheved Lifshitz, a frail 85-year-old grandmother who's one of the two hostages released by Hamas on Monday, recounted the moment that militants snatched her from her home in Kibbutz near Oz and drove away on a motorbike towards Gaza, a painful act during which she said she was beaten and sustained bruises. Lifshitz says she was forced to walk on wet ground and descended into an underground tunnel system she likened to a spider web, where she was greeted by people who told us, we believe in the Quran, and promised not to harm her and her fellow hostages. This is an experience that almost virtually every single Israeli citizen that has spent any time with Hamas militants that wasn't ruthlessly slaughtered by them, by the way. So I just make no mistake, I'm not making light of the situation at all. We're trying to cover it without accuracy. But this is something that I've heard from other hostages as well. They have all told the same thing, that first and foremost, they were like, we're not going to hurt you. We're not here to hurt you, which of course doesn't matter because they did hurt people. Okay, they did. But every single person that has been like, these Hamas terrorists, they've slaughtered my family, also told me they believe in the Quran and promise not to harm me or the other fellow hostages. There's no reason for people to offer that if it's factually inaccurate, especially when it's paired up with people saying that they had ruthlessly slaughtered their friends. Lifshit's daughter Sharon, who helped her convey her mother's comments to reporters outside of a hospital in Tel Aviv on Tuesday, called it a huge network of tunnels. She was initially grouped together with 25 other people. We already talked about that. They really took care of the sanitary side of things so we didn't get sick, Lifshitz added. Each of the 5 hostages in her group received their own doctor, and there was a paramedic present who supervised medication. They were very generous to us, very kind. They kept us clean, Lifshitz said. They took care of every detail. There are a lot of women, and they know about feminine hygiene, and they took care of everything there. Lifshitz also accused the Israel Defense Forces and Shin Bet intelligence service of not taking threats from Hamas seriously, and said the costly Gaza border fence erected by Israel had done nothing to protect their community from the Hamas attack. Why would she say this? Do you think that this is also a part of her propaganda? Do you think Hamas was like saying like, you have to say something that every other person whose entire fucking family was slaughtered from other kibbutzim have said? You have to repeat that line. That people that are in the Dead Sea right now, that are not literally apprehended, that have no friends that are apprehended, that have had their entire family slaughtered by Hamas, has said the exact same thing. And right now, the commentary on the pro-Israeli side is that Hamas is using the hostages as a way to stop the bombing campaign for 6 hours at a time, as though the bombing campaign has to continue. There's no way to do a ceasefire. There's no way to do anything other than continuously kill children inside of Gaza. And Hamas is using the hostage negotiations and slowly but surely trickling out hostages as a way to stall and cease the bombing campaigns. And they're reporting on this as though, sorry, these hostages have to die. There's nothing we can do about it because they have to literally fucking keep bombing.